Good morning, good evening, and good night, everybody. My name is Sarah, and today we're doing the mid-year freakout tag. I know technically June is the middle of the year, but in my mind, July is. Yeah, that's just because my birthday's in July. But, June's over, and now we're officially past the middle of the year, so I'm going to do this tag. I did this again last year, in July as well. We're ignoring that. Time doesn't exist. Moving on. So this tag has been around BookTube for quite a while. Every middle of the year, you go around and talk about all the books you've read for the first half of the year and your ambitions for the second half of the year. I will leave the questions down below if you want to answer them yourself. You're welcome to. So I guess with that all being said, let's dive on in. The first question is pretty basic. What is the best book you've read so far in 2020? Talked about this so much so far, and that is the Song of Achilles. This I read all the way back in January, which feels like forever ago and also like yesterday. This is the Song of Achilles and Patroclus as they grow up together, they live together, they fall in love together, and ultimately what happens during the Iliad, what happens during the Trojan War. And if you've read the Iliad, you know how this story ends, but I love it so much, and it's so cute, and getting to see these characters grow up together and live together, you get so much depth that you don't get in the original mythology. Maybe you do. I've never been very good at reading mythology, but like this is just such a new focus on their story. I'm absolutely in love with it, and I cannot stop talking about it because it's still the best in my mind. It's like nothing has even maybe one thing has come close, but nothing has come close to this. Question number 2, what is the best sequel you've read so far this year? I actually just read it, and that's Come Tumbling Down by Sean McGuire. This is the sequel book series of the Wayward Children. Originally, you get the original Wayward Children series, Every Heart a Doorway, and then you got to see all the prequels. What is these children's like before they ended up at the school? The school is basically for anyone who has gone through doorway fantasies and returned back. Before you get all the prequels, like what were their doorway fantasies? Come Tumbling Down is the after. In the end of Every Heart a Doorway, something happens to my two favorite characters, Jack and Jill, and it's just, this is what this is after, and it's also, it looks back into their fantasy world to the morgue, and I love this so much, and I read this during the perfect time because everything else I was reading that month was just subpar, and then this came along, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I also, I haven't read too many sequels this year, which is weird, because normally I'm really bad at keeping up with sequels, but I'm just glad I read this one. Moving on to question number 3, what is a new release that you really want to read but you haven't yet? Havenfall. I've been wanting to read this book ever since I heard it come out, ever since I saw it in all those book subscription boxes. I still haven't read it yet. This is a story about a magical inn, and I believe the Colorado Mountains. Everything is supposed to be safe there. No one's supposed to be hurt there until a dead body is found. And so it's sort of like a mystery of what's going on and how are the treaties of the magic being broken, and also like a mystery of what exactly is going on in our main character's life. And it just sounds so cool, and I really want to read it. And also I'm in the feeling for kind of a mountainy woods setting in my literature. I just find that really calming, but murder mystery, maybe not so calming, but it just sounds really interesting. Question number 4, what is your most anticipated book for the second half of 2020? That would either be The Cemetery Boys or book 5 of Trials of Apollo. So Trials of Apollo is currently my least favorite of the Rick Riordan series, and I'm interested to see how they wrap up because there's still so much that needs to be done in this book, and it's the last book in the Trials of Apollo series. So I'm really hoping it builds it up for me and makes it amazing. But then Cemetery Boys is a queer love story that deals with ghosts, and it's all Latinx culture, and I'm like, ooh, this sounds really cool. So both of these are really high on my priority list. Cemetery Boys, I believe, was also it was supposed to come out earlier, but its release date got pushed back. I'm really hoping that Trials of Apollo book 5 doesn't get pushed back because it's coming out in October, and that's really soon for everything still being pushed back. And I'm like, I need it in my hands. I need to know how this story ends. But yes, I'm both really excited for both of these, one of which I've already read the majority of the series for, the other which is brand new, and I am dying to get my hands on it. Question number 5, what is your biggest disappointment so far this year? The Diviners. I actually thought I read this last year. No, I read it in January or something. The Diviners is a series that's been hyped up for me for so long. It's supposed to be 1920, New York, and then it's all magic and wonder, and there's a spirit, and then there's also a murder mystery going on. It was so long and so boring for the majority of it. I did not find any of this interesting. I did not find the magic in this interesting. Everything about this book was why do people keep recommending this to me? Why is this so popular? I didn't like any of it. The writing style was okay. I'll give it that. But that's about it. So it was such a huge disappointment, especially with the last book that just came out. And I'm everyone was talking about it and rereading The Diviners and saying how much they love it. And I could not understand it. So this book was hyped up for me, and then I was completely disappointed by it. Question number 6 is completely opposite of the last question. What is your biggest surprise For me, This Is How You Lose the Time War. This is a romance. It's told in a lot of letter format about two women going back through time trying to stop each other. They're basically spies. They're basically agents for this time war. They're each trying to get their own alternate future to become the permanent future. And slowly throughout their interactions with each other, they fall in love. It just starts off through letters. And I don't like romance. And it's a really weird sci-fi because it almost doesn't focus on the sci-fi at all. You don't really ever see the time war come into play. It's all about their relationship. And I have really hard time finding books with romance that I enjoy, which is why when I find one, it stands out so much to me. So this book, incredibly short, incredibly well written. I fell in love with these characters and their relationships. I was in the middle of saying how wonderful this book was, and camera died. Yep. Knew that would happen. So I'm sorry if the lighting just changed, but I absolutely love this book. It's amazing. It totally surprised me. Yeah, that's it. Okay, moving on to question number 7. Favorite new author, either debut or new to you. I picked Terry Pratchett. That's not how you hold a book. I picked Terry Pratchett. This is not a new author at all. It's totally new to me. I've never read anything Terry Pratchett before. I think, didn't he co-write, okay. He co-wrote one book I read before, but I never actually read anything uniquely by him. The Discworld series, my total new introduction to his writing style. Amazing, wonderful. This is more to the copy I have, and it's all about, the character, meeting death, and, death just being friends, and, the satire and the parody that just covers all of his magic world. I want to dive into it so much, and I am, I don't read too many new authors. I'm really bad at that. And I'm just, this is a new author for me. And I am amazed. And this book was amazing. I loved it so much. And it's not perfect by any means, but this is so good. I just kicked the camera. That hurt. Okay, question number 8, your favorite new fictional crush. I established this last year when I was talking about this. I don't really get fictional crushes. I don't really get too connected to the characters in that emotional sense. However, this year, I will admit there is an exception, and Magnus Burnside in the Adventure Zone series. I love his character so much. He is chaotic stupid's the best way to describe him. He is the human fighter in this class of D&D characters as they go off on adventures. I would get along with him so well. And together, our chaos would probably burn down the world, but that's fun. He burns down the world anyways, and it's so much fun. Context for that. There was a character who had been petrified in a terrifying, agonizing way, and his hand was outstretched, and he was screaming, and Magnus was like, oh, someone's hand's out, I need to high-five it. I do that all the time. If someone's hand's out, if they're just asking me a question, their hand's up, I feel the need to high-five them, and that alone gave me that personal connection. I'm like, this is my new favorite human being, and I will protect them with all of my life. He's the guy in the middle with the battle axe, and I love him. Question 9 is sort of on a similar note. Who is your favorite new fictional character? I picked Death from Mort. Obviously, it's Death, and it's a comedy version of Death. He's just he wants a vacation. He very desperately needs a vacation. That's the whole, starting of the book. That's why Death takes an apprentice in the first place, who ends up being Mort, our main character. And he's so dramatic, but he's also, so tired and angsty. And I feel like he's that, adult emo who's just I'm just here now because I have to be. And yeah, there's more series in the Death series, but I haven't read them yet. I totally want to though. I don't think my library has the audiobooks, which is why I haven't done so yet. But Death is just an amazing character. So yeah. Honestly, anytime Death shows up in fiction, I am in love with the character. It's not that hard to please me. Give me personification of ideas, and I love it. Question number 10, what is a book that has made you cry? I still haven't yet read a book that actually made me cry. The closest thing is The Little Prince. This is a tiny, very sad middle grade book. It is all about basically a little prince who is from a distant planet, and he comes to Earth seeking humanity, seeking companionship. He's trying to discover the universe, and he, along the way, meets this pilot who has crash landed in the desert. And together they tell the story of each other. The pilot tells oh, my life story of why I gave up on imagination, and the prince tells of his journeys throughout the stars. And the story is so sad, and it's heartbreaking, and it's tiny, and you get so attached to the characters beforehand. And also there's little drawings of his the people he meets along the way, and I love it so much. I think the biggest problem was I had an emotional connection to this beforehand. I performed the play The Little Prince back in high school. It's one of my final performances, and my friend played the prince, and he gave such a good performance, and it was so heartbreaking to watch, and it was so hard to keep my composure while performing, and then just reading this again and remembering how much effort we put into that show, and it hurt so much, and I love this so much, but you come away with a broken heart, and that is the nicest way to put this. Going to the exact opposite of that, a book that made you extremely happy is the question for 11, and I picked The Night of the Dragon. Really, it was more the first book that made me extremely happy, but just the finale of this series. Shadow of the Fox is such an amazing Japanese-inspired fantasy story, and when I was first reading the book, I was closing it and I was holding it to my chest, and I'm like, this is amazing. The first 2 chapters of Shadow of the Fox was one of my favorite introductions of a book ever, and just seeing the conclusion, it wasn't perfect. I do think it was a bit rushed, but just seeing these characters again, and the more I digest the story, the more I realize how much this means to me. And I'm like, it's purple, and it's pretty, and it's inspired by Japanese lore, and there's so much in it. And I do believe, again, my bias of growing up with a lot of Japanese media, especially anime and manga, and that culture is really I'm so used to it, and finally seeing it in a westernized novel is just so unique to me, and that experience alone makes me happy. And the story is great and amazing, and I love it so much. Not enough people have read it, but yeah, this book just made me happy. And not all of this book was happy, mind you. There's some very sad moments in this book, but the fact that I have this now is amazing. Question number 12, what is the most beautiful book you have bought or received this year? I picked The Faceless Old Woman Who Secretly Lives in Your Home. I haven't read this yet, and I need to. But just look at this book, and there's something about it I'm just so in love with. And as much as I love the color blue, I think it's more how clean this book feels to me. And there's no dust jacket. This is just on the straight hard jacket at all. And then the inside is Nightvale does such amazing inside covers. You don't have to listen to the podcast to read this book. However, I am waiting till I catch up with the podcast to pick this book up, which is why I haven't read it yet. And I'm just, look at how beautiful this is, and it's it wraps all the way down, and you can see the little, apparently a boat is important in this story, again I haven't read it yet, and then on the spine you can see a labyrinth, and it's it's the same labyrinth that's on the flag up here, and there's so much about this book that I'm just every time I look at it, I'm this is stunning, this is amazing. So yeah, this is just beautiful, and I moved my signed copy sticker to the back because I just didn't want it cluttering up this beautiful book, and it's so pretty. It's so pretty, you guys. And finally, the last question number 13, what is a book you need to read by the end of the year? Obviously, I just said this book. I mean, most of the books on my shelf I need to read, but I can put them off. The one I feel I have to read fairly quickly, that's The Dragon Song. So this is one of my dad's favorite stories he ever read as a child. And he was talking to me the other day, and he's like, I'm so disappointed you didn't read this at 12, 14 years old. It might not have the same impact with you now as an adult. And I'm like, Dad, give me the book. I'm going to read this. So I'm waiting for the audiobook to come off from my library. I'm going to get it within the next day or two. So I am super excited. I'm going to be reading this book soon, and I'm going to know what exactly about this is going to make my dad feel so happy that I picked this up and read it. So this is totally a personal answer. I need to read The Faceless Old Woman very quickly because it came out and I pre-ordered it and I bought a signed copy and I haven't read it yet, which is really upsetting. But The Dragon Song is something personal and I need to read it, and just it's dragons and fantasy, and I do believe this is middle grade. He said I should read it when I was 12, so yeah, I think this is middle grade. But this is definitely a personal answer of I need to read it within the next week or so. So that has been every question to the mid-year freakout tag. Filming this has been very chaotic. Camera died, light died, kicked my camera. A lot of fun here, but it's done. The half of the year is over, thank God, because this has been a mess of a year. But hopefully the rest of the year reading-wise will be amazing or not. I've been having some trouble picking up books recently, but it just be that way sometimes. We all have our highs and lows. I absolutely love all the books I've talked about so far. We're ignoring the Diviners. They don't even get an honorable mention. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you want to contribute to this conversation, please leave any of your thoughts down in the comment section down below. While you're down there, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And as always, good night, good evening, and good morning, everybody.